Hi there YouTube, Dozer here, bringing you another Flesh and Blood video talking about Prism, the Light Illusionist hero. So today we'll be talking about the current incarnation of the Tank Prism deck list going into the end of August of 2021. I've had some time to test this since my last video, and I've been finding a lot of success with the deck, and I've been coming to some new insights about the deck, and I wanted to share some of the type of game plans and combos that the deck is capable of, kind of in a matchup agnostic setting. Hopefully, this will help any new players to the strategy get their head around it faster, and you might even learn something new if you've played this deck before. So let's get started. I will be talking about what the cards do this time. I'll be trying to make this a bit more beginner friendly. So Prism is the Light Illusionist hero. She can run light cards, illusionist cards, and she can run generics. Her ability lets her pay 2 resources and banish a card from her soul to create a spectral shield token. Spectral shield tokens, like the one you see here, are going to be auras that can absorb 1 damage that you would have taken, and they are mandatory. You don't get to choose. Though you do get to choose which ones are destroyed if you would destroy multiple. And you can also turn them into weapons with the different illusionist weapons, such as Iris of Reality and Luminaris. Each of them give your auras different properties, but this is one of the core cards that this deck is based around, the Spectral Shield. So going into the weapon choice, I've chosen to only go with Luminaris for now. Luminaris does everything you want it to, and the ability to attack for free is really extremely valuable. Being able to block with all 4 cards in hand and then still get some value on your turn is really valuable, and being able to swing hyper wide is what makes Spectral Shield so strong, at least in CC. Iris of Reality, it's so hard for Prism to keep her shields alive, and it's so costly for her to make new ones that I would rather ping for damage that my opponent doesn't want to block, and then go in for the late game chip damage rather than trying to throw meaty 4 attack Spectral Shields with Go Again, which you'll waste that Go Again a lot. Whereas if you don't pitch anything, you don't need the Go Again, so it all kind of works out the same. Beyond that, we'll talk about the equipment next. The only headpiece that I run is the Halo of Illumination. Halo of Illumination lets you put a card from your hand into your soul by paying a resource and breaking the Halo. Then you also get to draw a card if the card you put into your soul was light. That may not sound like a lot, but a lot of Prism's cards care about what has been put into your soul this turn. So having the ability to do that on demand is very powerful. Also, just to reiterate, Luminaris, very core Prism card. Basically, if you have a yellow card in your pitch zone, all of your illusionist attacks, both weapon attacks and attack actions, gain Go Again. And it also turns all of your illusionist auras into weapons that have the ability to attack for 1 damage at 0 cost. So then for the chess piece, the only chess piece that I run is the Vestige of Soul. Vestige of Soul is easily the best chess piece for Prism. The amount of resources you'll get from it over the course of a game, as well as the timing that you'll get those resources, is just the best thing you could ever hope for. Especially talking about with just Tome of Divinity, Vestige just makes Tome such a good card, and combos with Halo, and it's a real powerhouse in the deck and really allows you to play this deck the way it's trying to be played. Then for gloves, I tend to run 2 options in the glove slot. I tend to run either Null Rune gloves or Dreamweavers. Null Rune gloves, you can pay a resource to negate an arcane damage from a source, and then Dreamweavers lets you remove Phantasm from one of your illusionist attacks, or any attack with Phantasm. Both of these are useful in different scenarios. Normally the Null Rune is going to be valuable in the Prism Mirror or against things like Viserai or Chain, where you're trying to block all the extra little ping damage to keep your Spectral Shields alive. While the Dreamweavers is for matchups where the Null Rune is going to get 0 value, and we need to just push through a attack at some point in the game. Also, Vestige of Soul is key for Prism because when a card goes into your soul that turn, you gain an extra resource when you pitch a light card. which is why that's so powerful. So we have those cards in the hand slot, and then for the leg slot, we only run one card, and that's Phantasmal Footsteps. Phantasmal Footsteps is an illusionist unique equipment, which lets you do two things. First is that it lets you gain an action point if someone destroys one of your attack action cards by paying a resource, which means if they trigger Phantasm, then you can get your action point back, where normally you would have no other actions that you could do in your turn, even if you had go again. And you can also, when defending with Footsteps, pay a resource to set its defense to 1 for the turn. The only downside is that if the attack that you're blocking has 6 or more attack, it will destroy the Footsteps at the end of the combat chain. So you have to be careful not to lose your Footsteps, because it's a very key card for you to keep hold of. But it's very good at blocking chip damage like Kodachis or Shadows of Ursurs, things like that. And you can remember that it sets the defense to 1 for the whole turn once you pay 1, so you don't need to pay for it multiple times on a turn. And that's the equipment loadout. So this equipment loadout I've found just to be the optimal thing. Like, you don't really need to fit anything else or want to fit anything else. Anything else that you could fit in is just kind of unnecessary, in my opinion. But we'll go from here. So as far as the main deck is concerned, we're going to be running, 74 cards. So let's get into those. We're going to start out by running 3 copies of Herald of Erudition. Erudition is a light illusionist attack action, which has 5 attack, dominate, 3 defense, and phantasm. And if it hits, it goes to our soul, like all the Heralds do, and draws us 2 cards. That's a lot of text, and it's a very powerful card, but this is going to be the prime target that your opponent is saving their 6 attack cards to block. So you have to really be careful when you play this card, because either you need to make sure that you have the ability to get go again off of your Footsteps to keep your turn going, or you need to be able to get around their armor, because a lot of the times, if they don't want to block with a 6 attack card in their hand, they'll block with a 3 and maybe some armor, or they might just throw a Carrion Husk at it if they're Chain or Levia. So having that as a game plan and knowing, like, okay, I can't actually realistically hit with my Erudition in the early game against this character. I'm going to pitch my Erudition for the go again, and then the late game I will draw into them and will still get the value out of them. So that's a key thing that you should be looking out for. And in general, Erudition is best combined with cards like attack buffs to try and get over, like attack reactions to try and get over your opponent's blocks and get that on hit anyway to keep your turn going. Although remember, it only has 5 attack for 2 resource, so it is very minor on the damage side. So if they block it at all, you're only going to be dealing like 2 damage, and then you basically got to deal a free 2 damage and turn on your soul for the turn. You're not really going to be blowing people out with Erudition unless you set up a really ridiculous combo turn in the end game. The next card that we run is going to be 3 copies of Herald of Judgment. Herald of Judgment is a Herald, so it'll go to soul if it hits. It's light illusionist, 3 block, all of them will. This one has 6 attack, as most yellows will. And if it hits, your opponent cannot play from their banished zone on the next turn. This is very relevant against characters like Chain, Levia, Dorinthia, Katsu, Kano, and any other character that banishes off of a card effect to then play off the next turn. Now, being able to resolve that against a character like Chain is very difficult. It's very hard to line that up in a turn where it really matters. But it is a very powerful card, and sometimes it can just bridge the gap and give you a bit more offensive pressure as a 6 attack card that also has 3 blocks. So it's a very good vanilla, even if its on-hit effect is not relevant in the matchup. The next card that we will talk about here is going to be Wartune Herald. So Wartune Herald is easily the best Herald that you have access to, and I run 6 copies. I run the yellows and I run the blues. So Wartune Herald is a key card in this deck because it is an outlet for our yellow pitch that allows us to fight through Phantasm breaks. So if, for instance, we are playing against the opponent and we have 2 cards in hand and 4 Spectral Shields, and we have no cards in Soul, how are we going to get the go again onto our shield safely? Well, if we pitch a yellow and swing with a Herald of Protection or something, or Erudition or a Judgment like we have here, if they destroy our Phantasm, we won't be able to pay for our Footsteps to get the go again back. So it's really key that we have these 1-cost cards that have normal Herald damage, like 6 for the yellows, 5 for the blues, with no on-hit effects. It just goes to soul. But basically, you can throw your War Tune at them, and then if they destroy it, it's fine. You just pay the 1 floating to get your action point back and fire off all your spectral shields. If it hits, great. If it takes cards out of their hand, great. But you're really just using it to turn on your spectral shields, or pay for stuff with pitch. So it's a very good card to pitch in the early game if you don't have anything else going on. Like I would, if I had to choose between pitching War Tune Herald and pitching like a Rebirth or another Herald, I would always choose the War Tunes. And if I'm using Remembrance, I'm normally putting War Tunes back in my deck first, and then maybe Eruditions or other cards depending on the matchup. So yeah, 6 War Tune Heralds. You could think about running the reds, but I've found that the reds don't have enough utility to be worth running over other cards, and the list is already very tight, so I would stick to just the 6 War Tunes. You can reuse them later with Remembrance, so it's not a big deal. The next Heralds that we run are going to be pretty simple. We're going to run 3 blue Ravages. We're going to run 3 blue Protection. We're going to run 3 blue Rebirth. And that's all the Heralds I'm currently running. These guys are very, very useful cards. They all block 3. They all attack for 5. The blues do. They have multiple different on-hits besides going to soul. Because again, all Heralds go to soul when they hit. Don't forget. So Herald Ravages lets you deal Arcane if it hits. Herald of Protection creates a Spectral Shield if it hits. And then Herald of Rebirth lets you put a Phantasm card from your graveyard back on top of your deck. So that could be any Illusions attack, basically. The fact that they're light cards is very relevant for Vestige of Soul. These are normally the cards you will be pitching in order to set up your Tome of Divinity plays, as well as paying for your auras. So you can use them to attack, but I tend to only do that in the late game, unless it's just unless there's no downside. I'm normally just attacking these in the late game. So that will be those. Another thing that we'll talk about at the end of this video is going to be some combos, so be on the lookout for that. The next suite of cards that we run is going to be the auras, the Light Illusions auras. So for that, we're going to run 2 Arclight Sentinel, 2 Ode to Wrath, 2 Parable of Humility, 2 Genesis, and 3 Merciful Retribution. Every one of the Light Illusions auras has a keyword called spectra. So they can be targeted by your opponent's attacks. If they are, they will try to destroy themselves. The spectra effect will trigger, putting that effect onto the chain link. It will create a layer, and it will try and destroy itself, and something might happen. So, for instance, Arclight Sentinel's effect, it costs 6. It has spectra, and what it does is, if your opponent can target it, your opponent must target the Arclight Sentinel. So this is effectively a way to divert attacks away from yourself or your other auras. At the same time, Genesis is a card that says at the start of your turn, so before any player can get priority, you can put a card from your hand into your soul. If the card you put into your soul was a light card, you get to draw a card, and if it's an illusionist card, you get to make a spectral shield token. If the card you put in is both types, you get both effects. So this is a very useful card for turning on your Vestige on your turn, making some extra shields, filling your soul, and just providing that long-term value. It's very threatening for a lot of people. A lot of people will immediately try and kill it, so you can think of it as a cheap Arclight Sentinel. The next aura we'll talk about is Ode to Wrath. Ode to Wrath says that if any source you control deals damage, your opponent loses a life. And it also gives go again to all of your illusionist attack action cards, which is very useful because if you have a bunch of blues in your hand, then playing this will allow you to swing with all of them even if you don't have a yellow in your pitch. Beyond that, Parable of Humility is a aura. Also, every aura that's not the Arclight cost 4. Parable of Humility says that while attacking and defending, your opponent's attack action cards have 1 less attack. That's very useful because If they are focusing on using 6s, those will become 5 attacks when they're blocking, so they won't be able to pop your Phantasms anymore. And it also is useful as a defensive card to, you could read it as all of your cards block for 1 extra, basically. So it's useful to have access to in some matchups. And then the best aura, and that's why we run 3 of it, is Merciful Retribution. The reason it's the best is that whenever a card you control is destroyed, like an attack action or an aura, it will try to deal 1 arcane to your opponent. And if the card that's destroyed is a non-token light card, so that could be a Herald, that could be one of these Light Illusionist auras, it will go to your soul, as well as doing the arcane. So basically, anytime your opponent is trying to destroy your spectral shields, each shield they destroy is going to deal 1 arcane to them, and that can stack. So if you have multiples of these out, or you have them out with Odarath, you're going to be doing a ton of burn damage to your opponent. And the best part about this card is that it affects itself. I cannot understate how important it is that this card, at the very least, is a pay 4, deal 1 damage, go to soul. That is so much better than these other auras that sometimes they can just have 0 value. So Merciful Retribution is the best one. You want to see as many copies of it as in the game as you can. And getting that extra burn damage is really important for reach in a lot of matchups. So that's the Spectra suite, the Light Illusionist suite. I would say that in a lot of matchups you want to run these cards, but there are going to be some matchups where they are more of a detriment than a benefit. So you want to be careful to not kind of just play them blindly. You have to have a plan for why you're running them in any particular matchup. Like, you have to know the matchup pretty well to be able to make those kind of sideboarding decisions. And so what you'll want to do, if you have questions about sideboarding, you can check out my other videos where I talk about piloting Prism, which kind of goes into more of like the how to play the deck aspects, rather than just how to build the deck. So be on the lookout for those videos as they come out. Currently, I believe I have Bolton and Chain matchups, as well as a general primer to how auras work and things like that. So the next card that we'll be talking about here is going to be 3 copies of Phantasmoclasm. So Phantasmoclasm is a red pitch, 3 block illusionist attack action that has 9 attack, and when it's played, you get to look at your opponent's hand, and you must put a card from their hand on the bottom of their deck. They then draw a card. So it's effectively a forced sink below that does 9 damage. And what's really good about this card is that, and the reason I run 3, is that it blocks 3. It's a huge attack. It does 9 damage if it goes through, while also allowing you to grief your opponent's hand. Because of the way that the combat step works, before they can declare blockers, this card's effect resolves. So if they have 1/6 in their hand, you can put that 6 on the bottom of their deck, and then now they can't pop your Phantasm anymore. Alternatively, if you see that they have a really key combo piece, or you see a way to really mess up their next turn, you can get rid of that card as well, and try and force them into using inefficient and suboptimal blocks. Okay, so that's Phantasmoclasm, very, very good card. The next card that I run is going to be 5 copies of Prismatic Shield. So that's going to be 3 reds and 2 yellows. I would like to be able to fit more yellows into the list, and I think you can, depending on your meta, but I think because of how prevalent Chain is, I try to keep as many block cards as I can. And 2 yellows is normally enough. So what this card does is an instant that's an illusionist card that lets you pay 3 resource to create a number of spectral shields. That's all it does. The red ones create 3 shields and the yellow ones create 2. What's really useful about this is that you can pitch in a unique way. So if I wanted to play Prismatic Shield red, because of the way the rules of the game work, if I have no resources floating, I can pitch, say, a yellow card, and then I'll have 2 floating resources. I still haven't met the condition of paying for this card, so now I can pitch a blue card, like one of these Heralds, and now I'm paying 5 resources for this, and I'm floating 2. This is really important for turning on your go again before committing a Herald, so that you can get your pings to go off first, rather than trying to attack with a Herald. You lose your Herald to a 6 pop, breaking your Phantasm, and then now you don't have enough resources to swing with all of your spectral shields. So that is a key thing to look out for. But yeah, amazing card, very good to put in the arsenal and save for another later turn where you have the ability to swing with all your shields. Each shield effectively heals you for 3, so you can think about this card as a pay 3, have a 6-point life swing. And these also synergize with your Merciful Retributions, your Ode to Wraths, and if you can protect these and keep them alive, you'll just have a ton of value over time. So very key card for the deck. You want to have, honestly, as many of these shield creating cards as possible, but at the same time, you don't want to get too comfortable with 3 yellows unless you are finding that another card you've cut is worth cutting. Honestly, if it were me, I would probably cut 1 Phantasmoclasm for a yellow prismatic if I thought the meta was going to be a bit slower. Because you would get 1 more yellow pitch in exchange for a red pitch, and you can recycle your Phantasmoclasms the easiest of any card in your deck, so that's probably what I would do. Alternatively, you could cut one of the later cards I'm going to talk about called Pursuit of Knowledge, and you could probably cut down that to 2 as well. The next card we'll talk about is going to be Celestial Cataclysm. So Celestial Cataclysm is a 7 attack, 3 block light card that costs 0, and the only real cost to play it is you have to banish 3 cards from Soul. Normally, I would recommend against trying to play this card. Normally, those soul charges are going to be far more valuable for using Prism's ability. So what you want to do normally with this card is use it to block Phantasms in the mirror, because it'll be big enough to pop things like Herald of Triumph, which this list doesn't run, but it reduces attack. So this thing still pops that Phantasm. It also still pops Phantasm through Parable. So very good for that. It's also a light card, so it triggers our Vestige, Pitch, our Halo, and things like that. So very useful card in the mirror. And again, it blocks 3 and pitches yellow, so you're never sad to see this card. And it can be very good in longer matchups where maybe you resolve Genesis a couple times and you have some extra soul lying around that you can commit to the board. So very good card for that. The next card we'll talk about is Glisten. So this is Yellow Glisten. I run 2 copies. Yellow Glisten says that as an instant, you can pay 2 resources to put a number of +1 counters on weapons you control. At the end phase, weapons lose all the +1 counters. Now, the reason we run this card is that Luminaris specifically states that only during your action phase do the auras you control become weapons. So effectively, the counters will not be on weapons during your end phase if you put them on auras, meaning that they won't lose the counters, meaning that if you play Glisten on your auras, they will keep those counters until they are destroyed, which is awesome because you can protect your Spectral Shields very easily with this deck. And so in these longer matchups where they have a hard time getting through your block, this can become a deal 4 damage per turn for free or deal 7 damage per turn for free if you can resolve both of these. They're also light cards, so they help you with your pitch, and they're yellow so they can turn on your go again, and they can be put to the bottom of the deck very easily as a result, which makes them very accessible in the end game when you try and do some combos. So now, the best card in the deck, best card that Prism has access to, is Tome of Divinity. Tome of Divinity allows you to pay 4 resources, and if a card has gone into your soul, draw 3 cards, and if a card has not gone into your soul, draw 2 cards. So normally this is going to be a card disadvantage for you. However, when you have Vestige of Soul active, this can become card advantage. Card advantage in this game is crazy strong, and this is going to be the key engine that allows us to do our big late game combos. And it's an instant, so it can't block, but it pitches yellow like most of Prism's cards do. And it is just a stellar card, and you'll see why later on in the video. So we'll put that over here. The next card, and probably the second best card in the deck, is going to be Soul Shield. So Soul Shield is a defense reaction, which means that you can only play it during the reaction step of combat. And it blocks for 6 and costs 2 resources to play and pitches for yellow. And all it says is at the end of the combat chain, put Soul Shield into your soul. Now, this card is insanely powerful because of its ability to go to soul. It pitches yellow, which is again great. You can save it for later. You can activate your go again with it. But the fact that you have, with Merciful Retribution, Halo, and Soul Shield, you have 7 guaranteed soul triggers in your deck, means that you also have 7 guaranteed Prism abilities in your deck, which means that you can turn on your shields easier, which means that you can get a ton of value out of blocking for your shields. It also has the added benefit of also blocking for your shields in a nice even number of 6. The other great thing about this card is that it turns these dead cards in your hand, these instants, into a card that's effectively worth 3 block. So that's very useful as well, to make use of some of your awkward hands. So Soul Shield is very important for that reason. And for a very similar reason, we're going to run some more defense reactions. So beyond that, we're going to run 3 red Sink Below and 3 yellow Sink Below, as well as 3 red Fate Foreseen. So Sink Below is a defense reaction that says the reds block for 4 and the yellows block for 3. They all cost 0. These generic ones do. They're very common cards. You'll see them around a lot. Sink Below is a key card in Prism because it lets you sculpt your hand for the situation. A lot of Prism's cards are situational, and so you want to make sure that you are playing to your strengths as much as possible by getting rid of cards when they aren't serving you. So in that case, you might want to bottom a Glisten to try and draw into a 3 block. You might want to try and bottom a red pitch to try and find a yellow pitch for next turn. Things like that are really going to be what sets the good Prism players from the great ones. And Fate Foreseen is also very similar because you effectively preemptively decide what's going to be on top of your deck, which lets you combo with Sink Below, because Sink Below draws you a card after it puts one on the bottom. So you can Fate Foreseen first, see what's on top of your deck, see if you want to have that card, and then you can choose whether or not you want to sink that turn to try and get that card immediately. So run 9 defense reacts that are generic and 3, which is the Soul Shield. And these are just crazy good value for keeping our spectral shields alive, making sure that we're blocking as efficiently as possible, while having the ability to play around a lot of the combat tricks that other decks can run, such as Bravo's Pummels and Dominates, Dorinthia's attack reactions, Boltons to try and counter Bolton's damage, as well as a host of other cards. So the defense reacts are very, very powerful, and is what really helps us lean into that controlling identity of this deck. And that's the core backbone of the deck, really. What we'll talk about next is a bit more of some niche cards. So next card we'll talk about is Lunging Press. So Lunging Press is an attack reaction that costs 0. It pitches blue, blocks for 2, and all it does is give an attack 1 extra damage. This card is unassuming on its surface because, it only does 1 damage. But the thing is, it costs 0. And Prism has some of the best on-hit effects in the game, such as Erudition, which is drawing cards, Judgment, which is turning off Banished, etc. So having the ability to do that for free while also being a blue pitch that can block is great flexibility, and we love having access to that. The next card that I run is going to be 3 Whispers of the Oracle Yellow. So I adore this card. This card makes everything that Prism's trying to do better. It lets you block 3. It costs 0. It has Go Again. And it lets you opt for 3. That means that you get to pick the next 3 cards that you're going to draw, or choose not to draw the next 3 cards you're going to draw. That is insanely powerful in turns where you know you're going to hit with Erudition. It's insanely powerful in turns where you know you're going to resolve your triple tome combo. And it's very powerful on when you're being on the defensive, because let's say you have 2 cards in hand, you can, or at least this in Arsenal and 1 other card in hand, you can pitch a yellow, activate Prism's ability, attack with all your spectral shields, and then on the next turn, you can opt to make sure that you are drawing into either an aggressive hand to make sure that you can put on the pressure, or you're drawing into a defensive hand so that you can prevent your opponent from gaining tempo back. So Whispers of the Oracle Yellow, insanely good card. The only time it's ever weak is when you need that card to be a light card when you're doing triple tome, as it can get a little awkward. And all I'll say about that is that's going to happen. I really can't think of a better card to run than Whispers of the Oracle Yellow in that slot. It's fantastic. It's definitely worth the risk. Then, as far as another action, I run a single energy potion. You might make an argument that, I'd like to run more energy potion, but recently I've come around to understanding why 1 is just the perfect number. Generally, you want to leave this in play until you need to use it. Normally, this is going to help our late game combos, but you also can use it to bridge the gap to pay for your auras or for an additional attack. Extra resources are always great for Prism. She can use it to pay for Soul Shield. She can use it to pay for Heralds. Anything. It's a very good card, and we will normally have Go Again at the end of our turn from Luminaris, so you can normally play it for free very easily at the end of your turn. The next card I play is Remembrance. So I run 2 copies. Remembrance lets you put 3 action cards from your graveyard back in your deck, then you shuffle. Then you banish Remembrance. It's an instant and costs 0 and pitches yellow. This card is fantastic for Prism. Not only can you pitch it to the bottom of your deck for late game, which is when you want to be seeing it, to activate all your go-agains in the early game, you also can put back any action from your graveyard, including non-attack actions. That means you can put back Heralds, you can put back Phantasmoclasm, and you can even put back Energy Potion. So if you're in a situation where you've had to use your Energy Potion early, you've had to use some blue Heralds to block early, you can totally just play Remembrance to put those cards back in your deck to just use them over again. You can totally do that, depending on the matchup. And that's very, very useful and very potent. This also is one of the best targets for this is Wartune Herald in the late game, just to be able to turn on your go-agains, or being able to put in more of your generic attack actions, or maybe putting in your Phantasmoclasms. It's a very matchup-dependent card, but the ability to freely block with all the cards out of your hand all game, and then know that you have access to them late game is very useful, especially against grindier decks where you're going to need more gas. So that is going to be Remembrance. And then I think we're almost done here. We only got a couple cards left. So I run 3 copies of Raging Onslaught Red. This is a generic attack action that simply attacks for 7 and blocks for 3 and pitches red. This card is mainly useful in the Prism Mirror. However, it's also useful in the Bravo matchup or in the Levia or Rhinar matchups because it's a card that they can't pop. It's damage that you are threatening, and again, it blocks 3, so it's perfectly good. In some matchups, you don't really need to run this card, but in other matchups, it's just incredibly good at being both a defensive and offensive card. So we run 3 Raging Onslaught Red. I'm not a fan of Raging Onslaught Yellow. I think the yellow pitch is counter to what the card does for the deck. I don't think it actually helps. I think the red is better in every case. The last card that I run is 3 copies of Pursuit of Knowledge. This card is a 2-cost attack that pitches for blue, blocks for 2, and has 4 attack. And it says if it hits, you gain an intellect until the end of the turn. That means you draw an extra card at the end of your turn. That's extremely powerful and is one of the key reasons why Lunging Press is so good in the deck. Lunging Press working on both this card and Erudition, along with their awkward attack values of 5 and 4, means that your opponent's going to try and block for them exactly with maybe 3 in an armor or 2 in an armor or something like that. And when they do that, you can push over the edge with Lunging Press, get the extra card draw, and just really be in the driver's seat for the game. So now we've talked about the deck list, let me show you the key combo that makes this deck able to fight with the best of them in the end game. So for that, we will simply need our 3 Tome of Divinities, our Energy Potion, we will need our blue Heralds, as well as a couple of our auras. So we'll have our blue Heralds, we'll have an Arclight Sentinel, we'll have an Odarath, we'll have this guy, we'll have our Glistens, and that's what we'll have. Everything else can go off to the side here. All right, excellent. So the key things you're going to need to resolve this are going to be Halo of Illumination and Vestige of Soul. So let's discuss how that's going to happen. So let's say we set this up from your perspective. We'll have Prism here in the middle, we'll have our Vestige, we'll have our Halo, we will have our deck here, and we have all the cards here are going to be cards that we've pitched. These are cards that we set up on the bottom of our deck. We use Whispers of the Oracle to arrange them in the order that we want, and trust me when I say that you can consistently do this in slower matchups. That being Bravo, Dash, any deck that's not chained, basically. So basically you want to have an Energy Potion in play. Let me get the Luminaris here, just so you can have that visual aid going on. So you have your energy potion in play from sometime earlier in the game. The idea is to have a Tome of Divinity in your arsenal and to have 4 cards in hand. Now, you'll see in a second why it doesn't really matter what those cards are. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. Any 4 random cards. As long as one of these cards is a light card and one of these cards is a blue, you're good to go. So, effectively, what happens is you will, let me get a die ready for us here. Effectively, you will crack the energy potion as the first step, sending it to the graveyard. And we'll just say that this is our graveyard all in here, and that this is our deck. So you have 2 floating resources. From there, you will crack your Halo by spending 1 resource. You have 1 floating to put a card from your hand into your soul. So all you need to do is put a light card in. So let's say we put a War-Tuned Herald into our soul. We then get to draw a card. Okay, our Vestige of Soul is now active. And what that means for us is that for the rest of the turn, whenever we pitch a light card that is a blue pitch, we will be able to fully pay for our Tome of Divinity. And that's why I said that card advantage starts to come into play for us. So we also have 1 floating, which is relevant because let's say we only had yellows in our hand for some reason, we would still be able to pitch a yellow and get that full tome paid for. So as long as any of these 4 cards are a blue, we can activate the tome in our arsenal. So let's say we do that. Let's say we have a blue War-Tuned Herald, we pitch it, we have 1 floating resource, a card's going into our soul this turn, so our tome draws us 3, and our Vestige is active. So we fully paid for it, we're going to draw 3 cards. I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3. Now, as long as any of these 6 cards are a tome and a blue, we can do that again. So I think I put my tomes at the bottom here. So let's just say that one of these cards is a blue and one of these is a tome. So let's say we flip it over. Aha, it's a Ravages. Pitch it, play tome, draw 3 more. 1, 2, and you would have set up that you have another tome. So at this point, as long as any of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards are a tome and a blue, you can play the 3rd tome, pitch a blue, and draw 3 more cards. 1, 2, 3. This is all at instant speed, and this is so that you can do this on your opponent's turn if you have to as well. So now you have 8 cards in your hand. That's 2 turns worth of cards. And your Vestige is active, and you still have a floating resource. So now what do? The beautiful thing about this, and the beautiful thing about this deck, is that it's very, very flexible. You can do so many things with the blue Heralds, as well as the other cards that you might have pitched to get the resources to do this. So let's say in our hand we had 4 blues, 4 blue Heralds, and we set up our pitch so that we wanted to go for a maximum damage turn. Okay. What we would want to do is we would want to have an Ode to Wrath in our hand as well as some blue rebirths. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we'll do 8 cards. So as long as you have 7 blue Heralds and an Ode to Wrath at the end of this chain of events, this is what you can do. First, you'll play the Ode to Wrath from your hand. You can pitch a rebirth to pay for that in full because of your Vestige. Then you can attack with a Ravages. It has go again thanks to Ode to Wrath. You can pay for that by pitching a rebirth. So now you'll be floating 3 resources. You have to go again, you're attacking for 5. If it hits, you deal 1 from the Ode to Wrath as well, and when it does the Arcane, you deal an additional 1. So this card's basically coming in for 7 go again. Then you play a Herald of Protection. Using your 2 of your floating, you're attacking for 5 more. Plus 1, plus the Spectral Shield, plus 1. So it'll create the Spectral Shield, attacking for 1 more. Then you can play another Herald of Protection, pitching another Rebirth, going for 3 resources floating, coming in for 5 more. If it hits, you get a Spectral Shield. You're dealing 7 damage total from playing that card, and then you can follow up the last Herald of Protection using 2 of your floating. Now, you won't be able to go again from your spectral shields if you don't have a yellow in your pitch, but as long as any of these cards was a yellow, it'll still work. So that's fine. And then you can deal another 7 damage. So as long as you have a yellow in your pitch, which as Prism is highly likely that you will be able to do 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7. That's 28 damage. Plus, oh, I'm sorry, it's actually 8 because it's 5 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2. So it's going to be 8, 8, 8, 8. So that's 32 damage. Plus 2 is going to be 34 damage with this combo. As long as you have a yellow in your pitch, which you can do. So that's one option that you can do with all these cards. Alternatively, depending on how you stacked your pitch, you can do a very similar play with, again, a bunch of these blue heralds. But instead of doing a chain of attacks, let's say you're afraid that they are going to be a brute player and they're going to pop all your phantasms. Well, instead of playing the Odarath, you can do the same combo, but instead of doing the Odarath, you can do a Parable of Humility. Now, no sixes they throw at you will stop you from attacking, and so instead of dealing 34 damage, you'll only be dealing 6, 24, 25 damage with his hand, which is still very good. Considering the fact you're also making 3 spectral shields and stocking up your soul. That's a very explosive turn to be safe. And you can be even safer than that. So let's say you're like, oh, but what if they have a lot of 7s? And man, I don't know if I'll be able to do that. Well, if you have, out of the 8 cards in your hand, as long as they came from the pitched order, you can do the following. So you can have any aura. Let's just say it's Odarath for now. Let's say you have your 3 blue heralds. Let's say you've got 2 glistens, an Arclight Sentinel, and 1 more blue. So this is what you're going to do once you have your 8-card hand. You're going to start out by playing, again, you still have 1 floating here, based on our earlier situation. Although let's just say, fine, let's say that we have a yellow War Tune or something in our pitch. So now we have no floating, but we have a yellow, so we have go again off Luminars. What we'll do is we'll start by playing the Arclight Sentinel from our hand. We'll pay for that by pitching 2 blue cards, leaving us with 2 floating resources. From there, we're going to Prism ability, using our floating to make a Spectral Shield token. From there, we're going to play Ode to Wrath, or whatever the other aura is. It could be Genesis, it could be Parable, it could be Merciful, it doesn't matter. By paying for it by pitching a Rebirth. We now have 3 cards left in hand. What we're going to do is we're going to play Glisten twice onto our Spectral Shield by paying for them both with a single blue light card. So what that's going to do for us is it's going to put 6 +1 counters on that aura. Now we're going to be able to attack someone for 7 damage behind an Arclight Sentinel as well as another aura. Or some other combination of cards. I mean, you can do a lot of different things. But the point is, let's say you're up against a Kano and you're worried that they're going to pop that Spectral Shield. You can put the tokens onto the Ode to Wrath. And now you're hiding behind the Arclight still as well. And every turn you're going to be able to deal 7 damage minimum with whatever this aura is, plus the 1. So you'll be dealing 8 with the Ode to Wrath in this case, but the point stands. So this is one of the key combos that I use against Bravo. It's very hard for the Bravo in the late game to get through all this, especially if you've got if you put the token on the Spectral Shield, because if you've got some defense reacts behind this as well, because you'll draw up at the end of your turn. If the Bravo is not able to break through this and then still threaten your Spectral Shield, you can just keep hitting him with this every turn and win the game pretty effectively. Alternatively, you can have like the Absolute God hand where you play multiple eruditions back to back to back off of all the card draw you did, which is possible, but I wouldn't count on doing it that way. And so you can get into the really magical Christmas land territory of like, oh, what if one of the cards in my hand is an erudition, I draw into more eruditions? Like, yeah, you can stack that, and you tell me when that happens. But yeah, it's a very powerful effect, a very powerful combo to be able to play Triple Tome and get all of that value while having the flexibility to be able to attack with the blue pitches or having the ability to use them to pay for your more expensive cards. as well as the ability to just set up recurring value every turn. Sometimes you might think that like, oh, well, what if I set up a quadruple aura turn? I mean, you can do that. I don't think it's the strongest thing you can do. But if it works out for you and you can, let's say you get down 2 auras plus a spectral shield and arc light, that could be okay. That's not bad. But I'm a much bigger fan of using that extra card slot to pump up one of my tokens for 6 damage a turn for free. Thanks to Glisten here. So that's the main combo that Tank Prism is looking to use in the late game against slower decks. You also can try and do the whole ping with Spectral Shield things every turn. But you'll have to be able to get a feel for the different matchups and realize when it's okay to let your Spectral Shields go, when it's optimal to block, when it's better to just attack with the cards in your hand and let them destroy the shields, as well as what sideboarding is all about. So thanks for sticking with me through this video. Hope you enjoyed. I hope you found it instructive. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care. Peace.